After 14 long years and an extra month longer than New Statesman, Incredibles 2 finally hit UK cinemas, and it felt so good to be 10 again. As with Finding Nemo, it has been a long wait to get this film, and with the mixed reviews of Finding Dory, naturally the one fear was, what if Incredibles 2 is bad? Well, that is what I'm here to discuss today. Our favourite super family has returned, and the whole gang is back together, with Brad Bird returning to direct, and Craig T. Nelson, Holly Hunter, Samuel L. Jackson, and Sarah Vowell all reprising their roles. The only exception, for obvious reasons, is Spencer Fox, who is now too old to do the voice of a 10-year-old Dash, is replaced by Huck Milner, and honestly, it is very hard to tell between the two performances. Now, The Incredibles 2 begins where the first left off, with the Underminer rising and the family teaming up to stop him. That's the opening sequence, and we are given a sudden reminder of, hey, supers are still illegal. That is where billionaire Winston the Vor, played outstandingly well by Bob Odenkirk, approaches them with an idea to make supers legal again by placing tiny cameras in their suits so people can actually see everything that happens before the destructive aftermath, with Elastigirl being his pick to front the campaign as she is the least destructive out of herself, Frozone and Mr. Incredible, much to Mr. Incredible's envy. From there, we split into two stories, with one being Elastigirl's campaign and subsequent conflict with the villain Screenslaver, and Mr. Incredible having to stay home and look after the kids. Now let's start off with the positives and underlying tones and themes. For starters, the story with the family dynamic is played fantastically, and watching Mr. Incredible having to adapt to being the stay-at-home parent this time around in a direct juxtaposition with the previous film was joyous to watch. Now, while Elastigirl's arc is certainly entertaining in its own right, I always found myself wanting to see Mr. Incredible deal with the tasks of an angsty daughter, a behind-class son, and a super baby. One of the reasons I love this is the underlying theme that whilst Mr. Incredible is envious he can't be out there doing hero work, the actual fact he spends the whole film being a hero by simply just being a good father. We didn't love the Incredibles because they are superheroes. They are first and foremost a family, and we grew to love that family in the first film. That being said, Elastigirl has one hell of an arc. We have a whole film of her being the mother. Now we get to see what she is really like in superhero mode, and she is a highly intelligent, driven character. And aside from a small hiccup that I will speak of a little later on, her story arc is a joy to watch. From the action set pieces to the character interactions with Winston and his sister and the group of other superheroes, including a character called Void, who, from what little we see of her, is one of the best characters in this film. In fact, pretty much every character is highly enjoyable in their own way, albeit some of the supers having no screen time whatsoever. And while we speak of the characters, let's break down some of the standout performances. For starters, Bob Odenkirk is once again a fantastic corporate man with a lot of charm and charisma. The scene where he is pitching his idea to Frozone, Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible, you can literally see the parallels of when he's speaking to Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad, as it is effectively the same character. But when Odenkirk is so good at portraying these characters, he can keep on playing that same character, as I feel like this guy could sell me anything. Brad Bird is back as our favourite costume designer Edna Mode, and while we don't get an impassioned no capes rant this time around, Edna is still one of the best side characters in the Pixar family. In fact, I would argue that she is the best. The eccentric, smart, sarcastic lunatic is still making us all crack up laughing, and while I will be keeping it spoiler free, I will say she is the best babysitter ever. Now, obviously, we have the Incredibles family themselves, and Craig T. Nelson is every single bit as good as he was in the first one, still portraying that desire to be a hero, though his character does appear to be a bit nerfed in this film. But Holly Hunter is by far my favourite performance, and considering she's the focal point, it makes sense. While she was enjoyable in the first one, let's be honest, most people just remember that scene where she checks out her butt in that mirror. In this, she is more than just the stay-at-home wife that wants everything to be normal. She comes out with such a rebellious attitude attitude is almost as if she's gotten younger by 14 years. Riding a badass bike, both being modest but loving the fanfare, and bonding over wine with fellow supers and friends, she does a fantastic job to carry the caper side of the plot. Violet is also a whole new character in this one, being more open than she was in the previous one, and definitely a lot more confident. You can tell her character has matured a lot, though we do get some rather amusing jokes from her side. The comedy is outstanding, and the reason I feel these films have lasted in popularity is down to the fact that whilst it is a kids film first and foremost, there is so much mature real life comedy as well. How many Pixar films can you say you saw characters drinking whiskey? While they never use the word alcohol, any adult or teenager in the theatre knows what's going on, and there is a joke about insurance. There is the coping with relationship issues. There are so many jokes that will pass over kids' heads, but adults and teenagers will love it. Characters are straight up put into life and death situations, and it means the stakes feel so much higher. Same as with the first one, where there was an entire subplot of Elastigirl worrying that Mr. Incredible is having an affair. The way Brad Bird has written these films has made them easily accessible to many demographics, and while they don't overexpose the newly powered Jack, he absolutely steals every scene he is in, with my personal favourite involving a raccoon. Now, while I have talked at length about the good things, there are some negatives. For starters, the family dynamic when it comes to defeating the villains is lost. The first film, it took them all working together to win the day. In this, it felt like the enemies that some of them had to face are just there to give them something to do. It is very much the Elastigirl show when push comes to shove. Also, I feel like there is no surprise as to who the villain is, and the whole fake out thing is very poorly executed. I feel that's why this only just misses out on surpassing the original, as the villain is hardly a supervillain and does not have quite the threat that Syndrome had in the first. As a standalone film, there is very little wrong with this, and it is easily one of the better sequels out there. Overall, this was a sequel worth waiting for, and seeing these characters back together is a joy to watch. I also haven't mentioned just how good the callbacks are. They are only there as a means to forward the story or some brief exposition, none of the heavy-handed stuff that some long-awaited sequels have fallen victim to. Incredibles 2 is a highly entertaining animation, and it's easily one of the better films this year. Incredibles 2 is a great cup of tea. So Incredibles 2, you probably have seen it, it's been out long enough, but let me know what you think down in the comments below, and as always, hit that round subscribe button for more reviews coming all the time. This is that Spikehead Podcast, signing off.